Welcome to the Master Your Millions podcast, the show all about your financial potential and leaving a legacy for future generations. Here are your hosts, Jason and Scott Henderson.
We are super excited for our guest today. Jason, who do we have coming on?
Well, Scott, today I'm extremely humbled to have Mike Oster with us. And probably one of the first reasons why I'm humbled by my association with him is the fact that he's just simply a good guy. Beyond that, he is a retired brigadier general from the United States Army. And the guy is as humble and as straightforward and as a straight shooter as you're going to find anywhere in the United States. He wrote this book. It all starts with attitude. I have read this book, and it's awesome. One of his taglines is that excellence needs to be your average. Yet he has spent the last 20 years speaking and training for groups and organizations, sharing tools and habits that allow those individuals to bring their best self forward every single day and live in a place where, here it is, excellence becomes their average. And that's all based upon having been married for 35 years and a 36-year military career, which included 2 combat deployments. In fact, I know at one point, I believe it was in Iraq, he took 1,100 men into battle, and he brought all 1,100 of them back, which is just humbling and cool. I mean, it's just really, really neat to have you on the show, Mike. Thank you, General Osler, for being on our show.
Hey, I appreciate it, Jason, Scott. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited about having a conversation. Privilege for me as well. Great people, and I'm excited to have a conversation today with you.
Thank you. Let's start with a little bit, why the military? Why was it that you decided to go into the military? I mean, it's less than 1% of America that has the, what's to go do that.
Right. Yeah, I think it started when I was pretty young. We would sit in the kitchen, actually the dining room of a farmhouse, small farmhouse in a small town in, eastern South Dakota that I grew up in. And my dad was a Korean War veteran. And so he would put the slideshow up on the wall in the dining room. Now I'm talking the old school carousel Kodak projector, that's you'd switch from one to the next. And he would tell us stories, and it was fun to watch him. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. Dad probably didn't really want to be a farmer. He was the youngest of 7 kids. And at that time, the youngest boy was kind of tagged when dad was my grandfather, his dad was ready to stop farming. Somebody had to take it over to keep it in the family. And he was kind of anointed to be the next person. But that wasn't, I don't think, his dream, but he did it because that's what you did. And so I saw him be, not as happy as I think he could have been doing something else. He was a great man, and I was privileged to grow up under him, and still one of my heroes. But it was just when he would show me that stuff, I would just watch him light up, telling us stories and laugh about his buddies that he knew. And he deployed during the Korean War, so it's not like it was all fun and games. But his memories of that was something he was passionate about, and so it made me want to emulate that or do that when I grew up. But I also wanted to go to college because my older brother and sisters had all gone to college, and I knew I wanted to do that. And I had aspirations to be a business person. And so I found this thing called the Army National Guard that allowed me to both join the military and go to college at the same time. And it didn't hurt that they offered quite a few college benefits, loan repayment programs, a little bonus money, some tuition assistance. And so all of that combined with wanting to serve anyway, it just made it the perfect fit. And so I grabbed a couple of my buddies and said, hey, let's go try this out. And so we went and tested and got our physicals, and we're lucky enough to be able to join. And Jason, you're right about the whole less than 1% serve. But there was a time in my career when I ran the recruiting division for our state. And I can tell you that we turn more people away than are allowed to join. And so for all the people out there that tried to join, it's amazing to me when I tell people, or, they'll ask me if I served and I say yes. And they'll tell me that, yeah, I tried, but I couldn't because X, Y, or Z. And it's medical, or it's moral, or it's, it's whatever. And so it's unfortunate that we have a lot more people that want to serve that aren't able. So people talk about it being a sacrifice, and certainly it is, or a commitment, but it's also a privilege because not everybody gets to do it. And so I'm humbled by the fact that I got to do it. When I was 17 years old in high school and joined, I thought, I'll do 5 or 6 years, get some help for college, get to serve, wear the uniform, do what my dad did. And then lo and behold, 36 years later, I finally retired. So life has a funny way of going different directions, but that's how I decided to get into it. And it's a whole nother story how I stayed and stayed and stayed. So
I was
you're
watching
muted, Jason.
part of Captain America the other day, and my daughters were there, and it went past that, he was marked 4F. They stamped it and it said 4F.
Right.
And I chuckled and they looked at me and I said, well, what does that mean? I had to describe a little bit what that means, that he was unable, he wasn't fit to go do what he wanted to do.
Right.
I've never thought about that though, so much as how many people get turned away, that it can be a privilege. Tell us some of the challenges that you had in coming up the ranks. I mean, you ended fairly high.
Right.
For those of you that don't know, a brigadier general is a 1-star.
Mhm.
Yet, what are some challenges that you had learning to deal with the politics? I don't know what you really call it within the military, and becoming a leader.
Yeah, so when I was 17 and I went off to basic training, I joined, like most, it was an E1, and you go through and you do the basic training and you do your AIT to get basically your military schooling for whatever your specialty is going to be. Came back and was serving as an enlisted member and going to college and doing the things that needed to get done. And I watched the leaders, the lieutenants, basically, that we had in our unit. And quite frankly, it's just one of those things where I think certain people, again, watching my father, and he would see something and he would say that could be done better, and then he would explain how he would do it and it would be better. And I kind of always thought he was right. Of course, it's your dad, so until I was maybe 16, then I always thought he was wrong, and then I went back to thinking he was right again. But I would watch him think like that, and so it made me think like that. And so when I watched lieutenants making decisions, I would think, well, why are we doing it that way? And I voiced that opinion a couple times, and somebody said, well, Oster, if you think you can do it better, why don't you go become an officer? And I said, okay, I guess I will. So I went to officer candidate school, and that was harder and more challenging than I expected it to be. As were a lot of things I thought were a certain way in the military. It wasn't until you get into that role or that position you realize that you never have all of the information until you're in that position or at that certain level. And it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback looking up. And sometimes even it's easy to do that looking down, and even though you don't have all the information. But as far as growing in the leadership ranks, it was just always a desire to get to another level, to be able to affect change and work with a larger group of people. And maybe, I thought help at another level. For me, it was never about I want to hire rank so that that it's an ego thing. It was always, if you get to this level, then you get to work on these different parameters or with these different people or with these different units. And so it was always, for me, I was thinking about, well, I want to do this and I want to do it the best I possibly can. And if I do a good job, I'll get elevated to the next thing. And so I was always under the impression that every day is a job interview, every day is an opportunity to prove yourself, and every day is an opportunity to be the best person that's ever held the job you currently hold. And with that mindset, I was fortunate to continue to move up and be blessed with additional responsibilities and the privilege to serve more people.
One of the things we love to talk about on our podcast, and we say this in the outro, is that mastering your millions, in other words, accumulating, enjoying, and passing on wealth, all starts in your mind and with your team, that you should make sure they're the best. We're going to talk a lot about our mind, because your whole book that I recommend everybody read, it all starts with attitude, how to live in a place where excellence becomes your average. I want to talk a lot about it. It has a lot to do with mindset. Yet, let's talk a little bit about team for a minute. And number one, I'm surmising is Jo, right? Is she's the one that's been there through the thick and thin. Tell us a little bit about some of the things that she's taught you, and maybe a couple instances where she's played a key role in your success as a team member and a confidant.
Right. Yeah. So when I joined the military, I was 17 years old, senior in high school. It was January. And so, graduated in May, went to basic training, came back from basic training. I had met my wife briefly because my brother actually taught her in high school. So I knew who she was, but I didn't, we weren't friends. We weren't dating. We weren't any of those things. About 3 months into college, because we both went to the same university, we started to date. And so essentially I had been in the military for about a year when we got together. And so I always joked about, the only thing that I've been committed to longer than my wife is my military career. Well, I retired a year and a half ago. And so now my marriage is catching up with my military career. And they're about to cross over. So yeah, number one partner for sure. And I watched my mother help my father be a better man. And then I don't know that I went looking for that, but I definitely have a spouse that every day is willing to say, hey, you were awesome at that. But she's also willing to say, hey, when you did this, I think they took it as that. You need to be careful. And so she mentors me every single day. Sometimes, it's things like make the bed or do the dishes, but a lot of times it's bigger life things. And I hope everybody has somebody in their life that makes them want to be a better human every single day. And I've had that with her for, almost 36 years. So yeah, I've been very blessed with that.
Excellent. I want to tell a story around this whole idea. And what I understood is that, and I don't know where this started, whether you were a major colonel or once you became a brigadier general, that people would come and give you presentations. And I don't remember the list, but it's something like there were issues or problems, right?
Right.
And you said basically made a command decision that no longer are there going to be issues in anybody's presentation to me, whether we have, an objective to take from a military point of view or anything. There's no longer issues. They become opportunities. So I want you to tell us, how did that come about? I mean, it's profound, everyone that's listening to me, that you really think about this and listen to what Mike has to say. This changes the ballgame. So go ahead. I want to give you some time to kind of walk us through that, or even tell about, your experience in the one deployment where I think it's a fellow brigadier general almost chide you about it. And then something happens and he goes, whoa, I see your wisdom type of thing. So maybe I'm stealing too much thunder here, but talk to us about this.
Yeah, no, you're close, and I appreciate the introduction to this topic. And I haven't always thought like that, and my kids will tell you that I haven't always been this attitude guy or this, everything's an opportunity. Attitudes of choice, all the things that now I preach. I've probably been doing that for about somewhere between 15 and 20 years, probably closer to 15 if I'm being completely honest. But the topic that you're talking about, where for me, I had a mind shift of everything's an opportunity, no matter what it is in our life, no matter what we're dealing with, the perspective or the lens through which we see that situation determines what we do with that information. And so seeing something as an issue gives me a negative connotation about that topic. Seeing it as an opportunity makes me want to be involved. It makes me want to think about, how can I learn from this? How can I grow? What can I take from this? When most people are losing or being negative, how do I turn the tables in that and shift that mindset? And so it actually was, I was a lieutenant colonel at the time, and I was the number 2 in a brigade command. I was the second in charge. And so you're responsible for the briefing to the boss every single day that all of his subordinate leaders are giving to him or her, but this happened to be a him. And so at the end of every briefing, the briefing is always PowerPoint slides, at least back in that time it was. And the last slide is always issues. What are the things that are keep preventing you from really having the best training opportunity, or really getting your job done, or really taking care of your soldiers, and all these other things. And it implied that, what are we doing wrong in the facilitation of, and it was an exercise. It was a training exercise supposed to emulate what your unit would do if you got deployed for war. And so, what is it that's holding you back? And they would brief these issues, and every one of them was somebody else's fault or somebody else's problem or something they wanted somebody else to fix. And it would leave the briefing on a very negative note. And so at the end of one of those, I walked into the boss's office and just said, hey, I want to change the last slide from issues to opportunities, explained the reason, and said, let's just test it and see. And fortunately, he was open-minded and he said, yeah, let's try it. So the very next briefing that we had, which this was a 21-day exercise, so it was the next day, we had another briefing. And a slide deck went out and they were told, you absolutely can't change the last slide. You need to show us your opportunities. And that first briefing was pretty clunky. They didn't really know, so they didn't really put anything down, and they just, at the end, they said, hey, sir, we don't have any opportunities, which is, they're just shifting a word. They're not shifting a mindset. So we did some explanation and some additional guidance. The next day when they came back to brief, they started telling us about things that had happened in their organization that somebody reacted to, fixed, and made better, or how the fact that they didn't get something logistically they needed for a training event made that training even harder, which at the end of the day made them better trained. So they started to see these things that were coming up in their world as opportunities to make things better. And getting people to not just shift the word, but shift the mindset is the hardest part. And that's the leader you're referring to. And it was actually when I was deployed to Afghanistan as a battalion commander, I was briefing my brigade commander, and their last slide was issues. I changed it to opportunities. And when I first started briefing it, he stopped me and he said, what the hell are you doing, essentially? And so I explained the concept to him, and I explained why we brief opportunities in the 152, which was my unit at the time. And by the end of that briefing, he bought in. His staff had not bought in, but he had. And so it took us a little bit longer to get the staff on board and help them understand the concept. But that was really, and so that first shift of that was in about 2007 for me. When we changed that was that issues to opportunities in the briefing. And then my subsequent deployment was in 2013. So we've been doing this a long time. And then I just had the mantra with my soldiers that if you want to come and talk to me about something that's going on, a situation, you need to bring it to me as an opportunity and show me how it's an opportunity. And I've seen it work a multitude of times where somebody else sees an event, even sometimes a tragic event, and there is an opportunity to be gleaned out of that and a way to take that and help it to make us better at who we are so we can be better in all we do.
How long did it take you to change your perspective? Was it immediately, or is it something that you have to keep reminding yourself, being like, hey, I need to change my perspective here?
Yeah, I think the mind mental shift thing is sort of like a physical diet a little bit. If I reach for the carrots instead of the candy bar and I eat the carrots, maybe I don't have the immediate satisfaction that candy bar was going to give me, but 2 hours later, I feel better about having eat the carrots. But tomorrow I still might eat the candy bar. And so it takes multiple iterations of this mind shift. So with that day when we changed it from issues to opportunities, it allowed me to start thinking differently, but it didn't mean I didn't use the word issue ever again. I mean, it was probably a year or two before I said, issues leaving my vocabulary completely. And so it's just one of those things where you identify it as this is a better way to do business, but you still have to retrain how you think and how you react. And then the follow on to that is when life happens, we have an emotional reaction. And we can't control emotions, but we can control what we do with those emotions. So if somebody does something and you immediately think of it as negative or an issue or whatever, that's an emotional response. What I do with that, turning it into an opportunity, taking a step back, deep breath, change the lens, that I can start to control. But it's an exercise. It's a habit that we create. It's a muscle movement, just like anything else. So it probably was I'd say a 12-month journey for sure to get to where I was consistently preaching it and living it. So I would say, yeah, about 12 months.
Do you think, I mean, speak to the communication within your unit when that mind shift changed? Where was it the little guys willing to speak up better and faster when they saw an opportunity versus an issue? No one wants to come to the boss with an issue, right? No one wants to go to the boss and say, we got a problem. Yet they might be excited to come and say, look, we could do this, and this and be, way ahead or something like that. Talk to a little bit about what kind of communication, what it did for the morale and the communication within the unit.
Yeah. I would say at first people were a little bit cautious about it, or maybe even a little bit, there's probably rolling their eyes and saying, oh boy, here we go, the next new thing, I wonder how long this will last. But I would say that the willingness of people to bring things forward, I would say, grew tremendously because they were bringing it forward as the event plus the solution. And so that was exciting for folks. And that's not to say that everybody ever bought in. I mean, to this day, if you went back and talked to the soldiers that worked under Mike Oster at any point in their career, after I started kind of drinking this positivity Kool-Aid and the, opportunities versus issues, I think probably, I would like to believe 70 to 80% of them, but maybe at 60% completely buy into that strategy. In fact, it became Ostertunities instead of opportunities. And to some people, that was a compliment. And to some people, I think they were poking fun. And that's okay. I mean, it's not, you can't make people take something on, but the most complimentary thing to me, or the thing I felt the best about, was I watched leaders that were maybe 1 or 2 levels below me during that time. They would take on deployments after that. And I would get a note saying, hey, I'm taking Ostertunities with me on this deployment, and my staff is going to do what we did when we worked for Coyote Storm back in 2013. And so, I mean, that's very telling. And it's, you're never going to get everybody, and so you can't worry so much about the people that don't subscribe. You worry about the folks that are on the team, and you hope you gather a few more along the way. But it's a way of thinking, and it's a mind shift. And so I truly believe it made people come forward more readily because they were excited to bring what they had and show what they had done with it. And we found some real heroes out of that mindset. People that stepped up and made things happen, that because we saw them as opportunities, that you could look at and say, oh, that's a leader I didn't know I had because of this event and how they reacted. If you're seeing it as an issue, you miss the fact that this person really stepped up. I can be mad about who messed it up, but what I really want to do is focus on who fixed it and how they fixed it. And now I know I've got that person in my toolkit for the other things that are going to come up down the road. And this, when you're going into combat, you need everybody on deck.
Yeah, okay, I want you to give us a specific story, because you told me one once there was something happened in the convoy or something. I don't remember what rank he was. Was he an E2, E3? I don't remember, if maybe he was an officer. I don't remember. And he pointed something out. And I think it may even been directly to you because you were in the room or something. You made a decision, saved lives.
Right.
And you promoted him on the spot. I mean, that is just, yeah. But tell us that. Just I think that's something that people need to know, that, with the right mindset, I think was a function of opportunities. I'm willing to speak up for an opportunity versus an issue.
Right. Yeah, I think that mindset, it evolves into empowerment to people at all levels, because everybody is told, if you see an opportunity, we want you to bring it forward. And so you empower them to be willing to speak up. In this particular situation, that empowerment flowed through where we had a junior ranking. He was an E4, so still pretty low ranking person. It's sitting in what we call the TOC, Tactical Operations Center. And we're running a night convoy, and we're outside. We're running across southern Afghanistan with this convoy of about 25 trucks. And it's a logistics convoy. And one of the things we did to mitigate risk on our deployment, and it had been done by the unit previous to us, was we ran our convoys at night. And we were able to do that because of the nature of the business that we were in. But so we're running a night convoy. I happened to be out on the convoy as a battalion commander. I didn't go out on all the convoys. I went on them every, few weeks, just to go out and be out there and see what they were dealing with. So I'm in a gun truck on this convoy, and it's 2:00 in the morning. We're cruising down some road in Afghanistan, and we get an all halt, which means the convoy shuts down immediately. Nobody goes any further. And this young E4 sitting in the TOC had pointed out, based on some aerial surveillance that we had, what he thought looked like an IED, improvised explosive device, in the road ahead of us. And so to do an all halt on 25 trucks is a pretty big deal. I mean, that takes somebody with some real courage to say, I'm going to stop this convoy, even though I know the battalion commander's in it. I know all these, lieutenants are in it. And this E4 says, we need to stop this convoy because it's not safe. And there's a lot of opportunity to see something that you would think was a bad deal, just because, there's just trash everywhere. There's certain indicators for IEDs, but he put the 1+1 together. He says, this is an IED, stops the convoy without anybody else's permission. And we stop the convoy. And it's a long story, but to make a longer story short, we call in EOD, the Explosive Ordnance Detachment disposal, and they come check it out. And it turns out it is an IED. And we were about to run 25 trucks across this thing, and it was a massive IED. We would have lost several people had it not been for this E4 saying, I see something, I'm going to say something, I'm stopping this convoy. And we sat for probably 4 hours while this all went down. In fact,
in a combat zone.
What's that?
In a combat zone.
In a combat zone, in a truck.
This is dangerous. Yeah, it's in the middle of the night, but this is dangerous. Standing still.
Right. And this E4 has called this, right? And so for the first 3 hours, we didn't know if he was right or wrong, because we're waiting for EOD. And so I can't imagine what was going through his head if he'd been wrong. And, most people listening to this will say, well, at least, he erred on the side of caution. Well, not really, because you're sitting still in a combat zone So you're not safer sitting still unless it turns out it was an IED. So for the first 3 hours, we didn't know. So this kid's got to be a little nervous. Anyway, it turns out it was. They clear it. By the time they get it cleared, sun's coming up. There's lots and lots of traffic. So that decision, while it saved lives, put a lot of risk in that convoy, because now we have to, we're being intermixed with local traffic, and they can have vehicle-borne IEDs and all this other stuff. So it created a lot of additional risk, but it was the decision that, had it not been made, we certainly would have had a bad incident. And so it took a lot of courage for that person to say, we're doing this, we're stopping this convoy, and I'm making the call. And the next day, actually, the brigade commander came in, coined him, and told him we were promoting him. So it was an awesome deal. But it was because the soldiers felt empowered, and not just by me. I mean, this kid was, 3 levels below my leadership. And so the people that were in between him and me were doing the same things. They were making people feel heard, empowered, and able to make those kind of calls. So it was awesome to watch.
So let's just say, for example, that the opposite happened, that it turned out that it wasn't anything. In that kind of event and under your leadership style, what would have taken place after?
Yeah, we'd have fired him. No, I'm just kidding. No, so it would have been an opportunity for him to come in and say, okay, tell us what you saw. Tell us why you made the decision. Help us understand from A to B, from B to C, all the steps that you took before you made that call. And if he walks us through that, because there were certain protocols, we call them battle drills. And if this happens, these are the steps you take. And if he followed all the steps, and then, then we could see what he was looking at. And if it looked like it was supposed to be a 1 + 1 = IED, and he made that call, then everything was done by the book. No harm, no foul. If we missed a step, or if we did something, or if we overreacted, what could we do different next time? How do we go back and relearn that? And while it sounds like, oh yeah, I'll bet that's how you handled it, there's certainly a lot of stress involved in these kind of situations. And so you don't want them to not make the call. You just want them to be very sure when they do make the call. So it's a very, very fine line between helping them understand the gravity of the situation, either making or not making the call, but not taking away their willingness to make the call if necessary. And so if we missed a step or did something wrong, we go back and say, how could we have done this different? How could we have picked up on this and do it right the next time? And I will tell you that, at least for me, having to be a leader in a combat zone made me so much more focused on the right things I had learned from leaders I worked for, and avoiding the wrong things I had learned from leaders I had worked for before. Because it was just at a whole nother level of criticality during that time. But as I got back from that deployment, I realized that you don't have to be in a combat zone to want to focus so deeply on what's right about taking care of the people that you've been given the privilege to lead. And so it changed who I was and how I was tremendously. Not overnight, but just wanting to always continue to grow and evolve and be that person. So we had those situations, maybe not at that level, but that's how we handled them, is go back and say, tell me what you saw, tell me why you did what you did, show me the steps. Now let's go back and see what we missed and how could we have done it different. So we did execute that in some situations, nothing at that level, but so those were the protocols.
Still, though, it's coming from a mindset of an opportunity, a training opportunity, an opportunity to improve, not an issue that went south.
Exactly.
It's the same event. It's how you look at it. And so much of life is exactly that. It's how we respond to something versus how we react to something that can completely change the outcome, right?
Yep.
It's amazing. There's another good military book, if you will, out there that Jocko wrote about extreme ownership. And he talks about owning up to everything that's going on in your life. And you talk about that you've got to own your attitude. Why is it that you felt that you wanted to talk up specifically about owning that and taken responsibility for it?
Yeah. I think it's so easy for us to say, I'm in a bad mood because, or you make me mad, or you upset me, and all those things. And like I said before, those emotions are not something we can control. If somebody cuts you off in traffic and you get angry, that's an emotion. What you do after that emotion, whether you just assume that they have someplace that's more important to be than you do, or you assume they're a jerk, that's taking it to the next level, and that's owning your attitude, right? And so I think it's not doing us any good to go negative, because we're making assumptions. We're picking a lens that's got negativity attached to it rather than a lens that's got positivity. And the only person we're making the day worse for is ourselves. And so as I started to see that, and really, and then it kind of resonated into my kids. Like, they would get upset. And I'd say, you're picking your attitude. And then I would get upset, a couple of weeks later, something would happen and I would get upset with them. And they had the courage to say, Dad, you choose your attitude. And which is humbling, when the people you're supposed to be raising and mentoring, and even people that worked for me, they might walk in my office and close the door and say, "Hey, sir, how's that attitude choice going today?" And I'd have to just kind of grin and bear it, right? Because you're having a bad day and you want to have a bad day. But if you really subscribe to this, you just take a deep breath and you choose to go a different direction. And sometimes that's really hard. And sometimes, even to this day, even though I preach this all the time, sometimes I don't get that right. But it doesn't mean I'm not going to continue to try. And I'm going to keep trying every single day to get that right choice, and owning it, believing I own it, is the only way I have a fighting chance every day to get it right. So that's why I think it's so important.
And I may have skipped a little bit there because there was more I wanted to talk about back with your deployment. Your opportunities. You had a fellow, correct me in the event I'm wrong, a fellow brigadier general sort of chide you about it until you were in a meeting with your CO, correct?
Yep.
And just tell us a little bit about that. And then this other fellow general looks at you or leans over something and says, "Dang it, I get it," or whatever.
Yeah. So it was, if it's the situation I think you're talking about, we had made a decision that we were only going to have convoys go out with a certain number of trucks and gun trucks. And because it didn't make any sense to me, we were getting requests. So we were a logistics battalion and we were supporting brigade combat teams in the southern Afghanistan area. And we were getting these requests for 1 and 2 truck missions. And if you only send 1 or 2 trucks out and you send 1 or 2 gun trucks out and something bad happens, that's a very small team of people trying to defend themselves against who knows what. And so we had made a decision that we're only going out if we have a minimum of 5 trucks. And if we have 5 trucks, then we can have 3 gun trucks. Now we have 8. It was just safer. And what we were doing, we weren't supplying beans and bullets at that time. We were doing other things and then retrograding, because we were, even though it was 2013, we were starting to shut down certain places in Afghanistan, which took way longer, turns out, than it should have. But and so when I went to my brigade commander, he said he was getting
Wait a second.
responses.
You made that decision for the fact that it was an opportunity? I mean, what, right? That was coming from this whole mindset of looking at opportunities versus issues, because it
Right.
was
Yeah.
an
So
issue to go for 1 or 2 trucks.
yeah. So it was, so when we went, it was an issue for my boss because he wanted us going. As soon as they hollered, he said, "You need to go. We have because he brought me in and said, Oster, we have an issue, and here it is." And I said, "Sir, I think we have an opportunity." And this one was a little bit of a play on it. It was, we have an opportunity to save lives here, because if I start sending 1 and 2 trucks out, your issue is not going to be that they're not getting their supplies. Your issue is going to be that you're writing parents and telling them their soldier was killed in combat for what? For sending out supplies that they don't need today. It could be 3 days from now and they still get what they need. And so I was trying to make his issue into an opportunity to be smarter, bigger, faster, stronger about how we did our mission. And we were going back and forth about this. And we were at an event where there was a brigadier general there, a 1-star, and I wasn't a 1-star at that time.
Oh, okay.
But he came in and basically lit the whole room up because they were sending 2 trucks out. And in northern Afghanistan, they had sent 2 trucks out with garbage on them just to take garbage out to the dump, and they both got blown up and we killed a bunch of soldiers. And so that's when my brigade commander leaned over and said, "Okay, 5 trucks, I guess your opportunity is right," instead of making it an issue and thinking we had to get out. So it was about not making choices because somebody was trying to make it an issue for him. And I told him it's not. This other colonel, which was an equal rank to him, yelling at him because he couldn't get his T-walls taken down, was going to get soldiers killed. So it was an opportunity to go back to them and say, "You'll get it done, but we're going to save lives along the way." So it was a little bit of a stretch on the issues versus opportunities, but helping him see that we were doing it smarter, and just because somebody else was making it an issue didn't mean we had to jump. And he finally came around after that bad situation happened.
Yeah. So you've got through the military, and then you started to be I mean, basically in your present career, you really get a charge, I think, getting up and speaking in front of audiences and inspiring others to be their best selves. Uh, was that for the fact that you had to give speeches to soldiers? Where'd that come from?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jason. I probably again from my father. He was politically motivated, and so I can remember one. He spoke a lot. I mean, he read in church. He spoke at the community. If there was an event happening, oh, John, get up, and John was my dad. John, get up and tell people what's going on. And he was just always the guy that everybody looked to be stand in front of the room and tell us, the story or whatever. Plus, you always had to be the center of attention at a party. I probably got that from him too. But um, we went on a trip one night. He was campaigning for someone else, and we went to this very small town in South Dakota. It was about a 2-hour drive to get there, and for whatever reason, I went along with him. I'm surprised to this day that I did, but rode for 2 hours, sat there for an hour, and watched him speak to this room. And when I watched him speak to this room, I just saw the room just locked in. I mean, he owned that place. He could have told them to, I don't know. He owned the room. It was unreal. And then afterwards, everybody coming up to him. And I just was like, God, I want to do that someday. I want to be that guy on the stage that people are listening to, and, not thinking really that it would come to fruition. But then even in high school, I did some oral interpretation. And then in college, I did some student government. I was an elected official for a few years coming out of college. And all of that had public speaking and interviews and all these different things. And my military career, of course, included that. But I was probably in my mid 20s, and because I had been on the city commission right out of college, I had a group contact me and ask me to come and talk about that. And so that was kind of my first, and there was no pay, there was no anything else. But I went and spoke to them for 30 minutes, and I just got this huge adrenaline rush from doing it. And, that was all about me. And then I did it again and again. And then all of a sudden I realized that I wasn't the only one getting that rush. I mean, people I was talking to, and the message that was starting to evolve was giving them this newfound motivation and different things. And all of a sudden it started to kind of shift for me that while it's still very uplifting for me, it's watching other people have that aha moment, or somebody coming up immediately after the event, or maybe days after, and saying, I needed your message today. It was so impactful, or I needed you to tell me this. And quite frankly, I started doing actual motivational speeches when I was running the recruiting division for our Army National Guard in South Dakota, because we needed the schools to let us in to recruit their students. And so I was doing teacher in services on behalf of the National Guard. And that's where I kind of developed a core message that I started taking out. And that was in 2008 that I started doing that. And so from that time forward, it has become, this is my next calling. As soon as I'm done wearing the uniform, which was my initial calling, I'm going to this. And I feel called, and then people, after they say, well, how did you get into it? They will say, how did you become good at it? And I was blessed. I didn't do Toastmasters. I didn't go to training. I didn't, and I'm not saying that I'm great at it. I'm just saying that I'm effective because I've been given a gift. And so now it's my purpose and my calling to use that gift for good and try to impact certain, different people as much as I can going forward.
So people can book you then to come and speak at their events.
Absolutely. MikeOster.com. Go there today, half off for anybody that ordered. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah,
no, we'll put everyone, we'll put his contact information in the show notes. Your book is on Amazon, correct?
It is.
We'll put a link to his book, and which is, I'll say it again, it's a phenomenal book. When I first met Mike, I got a copy, and mine's actually signed, so eat your hearts out. I would go out on my office. I have a little walkway out. It's on the second floor, and I'd sit in the sun and I'd read it. And it was like the best part of the day to read some of the gems that are there. I do have to kid you a little though. There's a portion in here about humor. And I'm not sure I've seen you be very funny, be very humorous. So, where does that come from? Is that an academic exercise here, or something you feel strongly about, or do you really think that you're humorous?
I got to be honest. Now you and my wife sound a lot alike. She doesn't think I'm funny either. I think I'm pretty funny, Jason, in the right setting and given the right opportunity. In fact, sometimes I get in trouble for trying to be the class clown. But all kidding aside, I think humor is incredibly important, and I love to laugh. I love to make people laugh. If I thought I could make it as a stand-up comic, to me, other than all the other terrible things that go along with that profession, as far as travel and late nights and things like, I think that would be the best rush in the world, is standing in front of 1,000 people, just making them laugh over and over and over. And I love a good comedian. And so I try to be funny. I think I'm fairly funny, but I think humor is one of the most important things.
Why?
You know, you're supposed to laugh, cry, and love every single day, and I couldn't agree more. And if I'm only going to do one of those, I want it to be laugh and then love and then cry. But because I just think it's so powerful, it's such an adrenaline release, and it's just so good for the soul. So yeah, whether I'm funny or not, I love to laugh.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've heard you tell a joke yet, so it's I'm like, okay, well, you're just you still look like a general. I mean, you start your haircut and everything, you still look,
Yeah.
and your physique, it's like you're imposing.
Yeah, I
So
appreciate
it's
that. I
like,
mean, I appreciate that from the perspective of, I work hard to continue to be in shape and try to be a role model in every sense of that. You know, I talk in the book, I talk about the 4 types of fitness, and physical is certainly one of those, but the spiritual, emotional, and mental fitness that goes with those. And those are all super important to me. And that is, it's a blessing and a curse. You know, when I was in the military and I was in uniform and I was in front of a formation, you know, I'm 6'2" and I've got a nice frame for that, which I worked at, by the way. I mean, I was a skinny little kid for most of my life. But again, if you're going to do something, I feel like you should be all in. And if you're going to wear a uniform, you should be a billboard for that uniform. And so, and it's great when you need it to be, when you want to be that intimidating figure, you need that immediate authoritarian look or whatever. But you do, then it's hard to get away from it sometimes. And I'll, even now in the small businesses that we own, or in the military, when I wasn't even in charge of a certain group of soldiers, they'd be like, "Well, they're super intimidated by you, sir." And I'm like, "Well, why? I mean, I'm the nicest guy I know, and why would people be intimidated?" And it is, so you have that persona, which can be good in certain situations, but sometimes you have to get around that for people to let their guard down and be who they really are, and some of those things. So I have to be careful about that too. So it's
yeah,
good, and for the most part, I feel blessed. But yeah, it's everything comes with the good and bad, right? You gotta work the strengths and then continue to improve the weaknesses.
absolutely. And I think you do a very good job with that. Scott, what something from you?
Looking forward, we've spent a lot of time looking back at a lot of these experiences you've had. So let's shift it. Looking forward in the next 5 years, what's that next big mountain you're trying to climb?
That's a great question. And so I think it's a couple things. One is, I'm not sure I've always been very good at life balance. And when I talk about life balance, it's really prioritization of the time that we have. And I think I've been a little bit lax in that. Again, back to my amazing wife and her ability to support and, you know, be an amazing mother and wife at the same time. Reprioritizing what I think I need to accomplish and at what expense I'm willing to go. So having those values in place that are not negotiable, which I kind of had before, but they were always a little bit flexible, because I always felt like I was maybe trying to get that next promotion, or maybe I was trying to get to that next job assignment, or I was sacrificing some things that in hindsight I would do probably a little bit differently. So the first mountain I'm trying to climb is, I'm not gonna fluctuate anymore on those values and those commitments and the prioritization. So, you know, God, my wife, and my family. And if I'm scheduled to go watch my grandson for 5 days so that my son and his wife can go somewhere, and somebody says, "Hey, will you come and speak on this day?" The answer is no, because I'm going to be with my grandson and I'm going to take care of my son and his wife, and that kind of, so getting that prioritization locked in and making it non-negotiable. Once I've done that, then the mountain right next to that one is speaking 30 or 40 times a year and spreading this message of positivity, making excellence your average, becoming better at who we are so we can be better in all we do, and doing it on any stage that will allow me the privilege of being on that stage. And so that's one huge advantage of my message, is it's about people. It's not about business. It's not about a certain type of sales. It's not about a certain, you know, piece of manufacturing. It's about us as individuals. And so and it's not my stuff, right? It's all these people that I work for, all these people that I've read, or all these people that I've been exposed to. I'm always picking something up from them. You know, Jason, even meeting you and Tanya and your family. I mean, the family, that commitment to prioritization of family. I mean, I watched your family, you know, and all the kids you had at the last event we were at. you can just tell the families that are getting it right. And I don't know, Scott, maybe you wouldn't say he's the perfect dad, but it seems like he's doing a pretty good job to me. And so every time I meet somebody, I'm trying to glean something from them, and mostly good. Sometimes you get well, I'm not going to do that from somebody you meet. So it's going out and taking all this stuff that I've been blessed to learn, using the vehicle of presentations and speaking that I've been given, and trying to affect as many people as possible over the next 5 years. And I'm super excited about it, but it's a little harder than I thought it was going to be to get found and to get out there and actually do that. So that's the big hill I'm climbing right now.
So TED Talk.
TED Talk would be good.
Okay,
Working on a TED Talk.
let's put it out there. TED Talk, everyone.
Yep.
Mike Oster would like to do a TED Talk, and he would be a phenomenal TED Talk. We have people that listen to our podcast that may even have those kind of connections, and let's connect and get him on that stage. And I want a commitment from you, sir. When you do that TED Talk, one of the first calls is to Jason saying, I'm doing a TED Talk at this location. You be in the audience, and I'm coming back on the podcast to tell everybody about it.
Perfect. Committed. I would absolutely love to do that. I
love it. Normally we talk a little bit more about money. We've talked all about mindset today and attitude. And you said it's not about, this, and this. It's really about the individual. And it is. The cool thing is when you get your heart set and your mindset correct, wealth follows, right? Wealth is not in things. It's not in the number of dollars in your bank account. Wealth is in relationships. Wealth is in your family and things that are important to you. Yet money, dollars, is important. And there are things and times that come along that when you have things right, you will understand what to do. I wish you all the success in the world, the successful, you've got a good retirement having done what you've done, and we thank you for that. Yet this speaking opportunities are coming, where you can be compensated quite well to get on a stage and move an audience for large corporations. I mean, I know they put out some good coin to do that. So I hope that's possible for you. I know that you've been a little bit involved in some real estate, have quite a bit about knowing what an accredited investor is and those type of investments. Give us a couple of real quick sentences about when someone should start investing in real estate.
Yeah, so we dabbled in real estate. I was probably about 35, I think, when we first got into it, and we were doing rental properties. And I would, we have since gotten out of that business, but we were fortunate to make some good money doing that. And then again, it becomes a time thing, right? If real estate is right for you, knowing how to do it and understanding the different things that you can do, if you're able to get into it, if you're able to have a management company. In hindsight, one of the things I would have done is I would have gotten into a management, had a management company involved right away. And I would have figured that into my cash flow projections, because it cost me more money not having somebody involved. For instance, if I would lose a tenant at the end of November, it would be the 1st of February before I would have the property ready, get the listing out, be able to show people the property. So I would lose 3 months of rent by not having a manager who I didn't want to pay at that time 8% per month. And so that was a huge lesson learned. But I am a huge advocate for real estate, what it can do for you. And you said I've got a nice pension, and I do have a nice pension. I'm never gonna starve, but it's not what you would call a wealth builder when you're working to a pension. I mean, that's why the pension formula in the corporate world has kind of gone away, and they've gone to this 401k. In fact, the military now they've reduced the pension and employed a 401k mindset into the military so that you can have some control over what you put in and what you get out. And then the use of insurance products, which you and I have talked very briefly about, Jason.
About the infinite banking concept.
What's that?
The infinite banking concept, yeah.
Yes, the infinite banking concept. Yeah, that was something until you and I started visiting about it. And then I appreciate you sending me the book. I looked through the book and did some research on it. An opportunity to be your own banker and to borrow your own money and that kind of thing. I wish I would have been exposed to that at a younger age, but I don't think it's ever too late to start doing some of those kind of things. And the message I would give everyone, and I've told my kids this, in fact, I'm trying to get them connected all the time, is that no matter how good you think you are at this, you're better off to at least start with a professional when it comes to investments and finances and different things like that, because the most well-intended people, there's very few that can actually do it the way that it needs to be done and monitor it. And how much time do you really want to spend trying to become an expert in something that for a small percentage of what you're going to invest, you can have someone else that is that expert do it for you. I mean, you don't change your own oil probably. So why are you trying to do your own investments? And so it's just, you got to pick those things. And that one, if I could go back and do that one over, I would have started out with somebody that knew what they were doing far more than I did and gotten into that. And then, being exposed to some of the things that you talk about would have been a great deal.
I find that really, really curious coming from you, who knows intimately well the importance of having specialists within your unit.
Right.
Yeah. The unit's no good, no better than your mechanic, right? I mean, if you don't have a good mechanic that can get the thing running and on top, tip top shape, I just surprised that didn't translate. Here's a weakness of mine. I'm going to hire it out.
Yeah.
Right. Or collaborated or something. In the military, there's no you can't have weaknesses, right? You've got to find someone to put in this role to make sure that things run properly. And then to hear you say, well, I should have got someone to help me manage it better. That's interesting. That's a common mistake. That's a very, very common mistake that people get into and say, oh man, I don't want to go clean toilets. I don't want to do this. I'm getting out. Right.
Right.
Instead of finding a specialist in that area to take care of that. And yeah, maybe your take home is slightly less, yet your worry is way, way down. Interesting.
Yeah.
That blows my mind. Having had this long conversation with the brigadier general, and then to hear him say that about something outside the military.
Yeah, so it's and it's even probably worse because of the fact that when you're in the military and you're working towards that pension, right? So your financial freedom is not something you're really focused on, and it becomes one of those things that you say at some point, I want to have wealth, or I want to be, financially independent, or there's all these things I want to do. I mean, I would love to write a giant check to my church for this new building they just built. And it would have been great to have the ability to do that. And you keep thinking, well, when you're 25 and you're saying things like that, if you don't make it a priority and you don't bring somebody in to start doing those, you just talk about it and you don't act on it because you're so busy over here on what takes your day-to-day time. And so getting people to have the realization that you just were mind blown that I didn't have when I was young. I think it's not just in the military, it's happening all over the place where everybody talks about wanting to be financially free, but what are they actually doing about it? We're living paycheck to paycheck. And in the business that I own, we started an opportunity for people to be involved in a 401k, and 30% of our employees took advantage of it, which means the other 70% right now don't believe that they can take 3% out of their paycheck to get 3% added to it and put into a retirement. So we've got some work to do in educating them. And so you're exactly right. In hindsight, I'm stunned and disappointed that I didn't have that vision, but it also helps me, again, issue our opportunity, because now I have 70 employees in 2 different locations, and I can help them understand based on something that happened to me. And so now, and we've still got time. My wife and I are, it's not like we're going to starve to death, and we've still got time to do some of these other things. And again, that's why you keep meeting cool people along the way, and there's opportunities still out there. But it's just one of those things, because it wasn't a priority, because I didn't sit down and make it happen. I didn't look at that wealth building opportunity that was probably right in front of me. And I just, I'll get to that later, and pretty soon 35 years have gone by. So yeah.
Cool. Well, Mike, we really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. It's been not only a pleasure, but eye-opening in a lot of ways. In wrapping things up and closing up, is there any final words that you'd give to our listeners?
Well, I guess first of all, thanks for having me on. It's a great opportunity, and what a privilege to be affiliated with great people like yourselves. And I love the fact that you guys are doing this together as a father and son. I think that to me speaks volumes about the kind of people that you are, first and foremost. And I think going forward, the final closing message I would have is that if people really want to live in this place where excellence becomes their average, if they really want to do certain things, it's sort of that old axiom of, if you're trying to cut down a tree with a saw, do you just keep sawing, or do you stop occasionally and sharpen the saw so that you're more effective when you go back to it? And I think too often we get caught up in the day to day, and we get to the end of the day and we go, gosh, what did I accomplish today? I don't feel like I accomplished anything. And it's mostly because we didn't stop and sit down and say, here's my plan for the day. These are the things I want to get done. And at the end of the day, I can look and see what I actually got done. And it's not just a daily look that we need to be doing that on. It's kind of like the question you asked, Scott, where do I want to be in 5 years? Well, where do I want to be in 1 year, and 3 years, and 4 years? And so stepping back and making those kind of commitments to me is important to me, but it's more important to the people that I love. And so choosing my attitude, living where excellence is my average, and taking the time to know where I'm going so that I know when I get there are all so very important. And then the rest of it all takes care of itself. And so, and part of that is, what's my financial plan? And so I love what you guys are doing on the financial side too. So thanks for having me on the podcast. Thanks for what you do. And thanks for being role models for the rest of us.
Of course. Thank you again. Dr. J, anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I've been stealing Mike's excellence becoming your average. I've been stealing that a little bit and using that in some of the things in some of my conversations. And I want to remind everybody that excellence is simply a commitment to completion, right? And completing whatever it is that you set out in front of you. So having excellence, being committed all the way to completing to the completion, have that be your average. I think that's so cool. And it's just a message that we should have in front of us. Put it on your computer screen. Excellence is my average. I think would be a good thing for everyone to do.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you'd like to connect with our guest, we will put his contact and everything in the show notes down below. Also, remember, go get his book. It is fantastic. If you'd like to connect with Jason or I, make sure to hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or shoot us an email. Again, all the links are in the show notes down below. And if you do us a favor, drop us a 5-star review if you like this episode. Really helps us out. And last, please remember that mastering your millions all starts with your mind and your team. Make sure they are the best. We will catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Millions with Jason and Scott Henderson. Check the show notes for any links or contact information about today's guest. Make sure to follow the show so you don't miss any future episodes.